So my name is Michael Vickars. I'm here at Concordia. I work for Paraclete Consulting. I am the on-scene, on-site security officer here. And kind of what we're going to be talking about today is hard lockdown and soft lockdown and what we kind of do in each of those situations. And I welcome any of your questions. And if I can't answer your questions right now, I'll find out the answer and I will definitely get to you. So the first one we're going to go over is our soft lockdown. Soft lockdown is one of those instances where there's something going on, maybe on our campus, maybe in our area that we're not quite sure what's going on. One of those examples, last year we had an individual who came onto our campus. He was not quite right. He had some issues going on, and he stripped nude and was wandering around our campus. That is a good thing for calling of a soft lockdown. It's not necessarily he's a threat and he's a danger, but we kind of want to protect the innocence of our children. So by reducing their ability to see that or experience that, we would go into a soft lockdown. So what exactly is a soft lockdown? What do we do? So for a soft lockdown, if we're outside on the playground or if we're on a prayer walk or we're in buggy time going around the campus, when you hear soft lockdown, or our brevity code, you're going to go immediately into a building. Preferably, you come straight back here to this building, come inside, make sure the doors are shut, and all exit doors, including that secondary door, are closed. And we're just going to come inside and we're going to stay inside. If we're planning on going out to recess, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay inside. So a soft lockdown is nothing major. We don't necessarily have a credible threat, but we're just going to come back inside. We're going to stay here until we're cleared. All of these situations, all of these things that we're going to be talking about, we're not going to stop. We're not going to go back to normal business until it's been cleared. So we go into a soft lockdown. You're going to stay inside until the director or myself come and say, hey, the threat has been lifted. You can go back to normal operations. Does everybody understand and kind of understand the point of that? Another thing is when I talk about the area. So, we live in a pretty populated area where there's a lot going on. Something could be happening in our area that it could eventually move towards us. We don't necessarily know, say, somebody's down the road robbing a bank and they're getting ready to leave and we don't know which direction. They could come onto our campus. At that point, we're going to go to a soft lockdown just to minimize the movement outside. And if we have to go to a hard lockdown, we can do that then, but kind of doing it in steps. Does that make sense? All right. So we went over soft lockdown, hard lockdown. What exactly is a hard lockdown? That is where we have a credible threat. Something is taking place here on our campus, and we need to come not only inside, but we need to stay in our classrooms. Everybody in their classroom has those keys that are in the little box that's magnetized. So at that point, you're going to be in your classroom and you're going to lock your doors. Lock your doors, making sure your exterior and interior doors are secured and closed. Everybody, because we have these windows in our interior doors, we're going to put up that cardboard or there's some kind of cover that you guys have in there, correct? Where you're going to cover, you're going to turn off the lights. If you have a cell phone, which most of you guys don't have cell phones, but if you have a cell phone, you're going to put it on silent. You don't necessarily want to turn it off, and I'll explain why here in a little bit. As well as when you're in there, you're going to start taking anything and everything you can to block entries. And that means these doors here as well as your exterior doors. So if that means taking bookcases and moving them in front of doors and windows, taking tables, moving them, stacking chairs up. And what this is you're trying to make it as difficult as possible for somebody to come in. If we look at a lot of the statistics of events that take place where you have an intruder, you have an active shooter, things like that, a lot of the times you'll have these individuals who are on a one-track mind of this is what I'm going to do, and if anything affects that, they can't process that, if that makes sense. So when they're going through it and they try a door and it's locked or it's barricaded, they're not going to stay there and fight that door. They're going to keep moving on. So that's what we do this for, is to make it as difficult as possible so that they don't even try to come in. we're shutting the lights off, and then we're taking our children and we're moving our children into an area of your room that limits the visibility of looking in or seeing or possible danger, and we're moving them into that area. And it's important that this is crazy going on right now, and it's scary, and I understand that there's a lot of emotion and panic and anxiety, but being able to keep your emotions in check, because your emotions feed into what's going on with the children. And if you are freaking out, the children will sense it. They'll start freaking out. They'll start getting louder and louder and louder, and we don't want that. So staying calm, knowing your children and what calms them down is important, because you need them to be as quiet as possible. So moving them into there, coming up with something to do that's quiet to keep them calm and entertained, because kids have a short attention span before they start getting loud and rambunctious again, and they don't necessarily know what's going on. So keeping them kind of under control and calm. I talked about the cell phone and why you wouldn't necessarily want to turn it off. A lot of times you have an incident that will occur and somebody else will think, well, somebody else called 911. I don't need to call 911, somebody else did. And then it turns out nobody's called 911. It happens way more often than you think, especially driving, on a highway and you see an accident, you pass by, oh, somebody must have already called. Call 911, let them know what's going on. It's important to be quiet and keep your phone on silent, because they're going to keep you on the line the whole time. But what you're doing is you are the eyes and ears of what's going on within this building. Dispatch is getting information from you so that they can send it to the officers so when the officers are responding, they know how many people are in the building. What are they doing? Where are they at? Where are they going? Where have they been? So all of this information helps to send to the officer, so when they respond, they can go to immediately the threat to end it. So that's kind of what we're doing. There's roles, so you guys have ultimate authority and control of your children, and it's important. In the last class that we kind of went over, you are responsible for those children until they are picked up. That's not picked up before we're secured or before we're allowed, or before I come and say, okay, we can go ahead and start releasing these kids. But you're solely responsible for your children and getting them to the people, their parents or whoever their emergency contact is. So having your binder. So what's important about these classes is getting information, but it's even more important that when we're done, you go back to your classrooms, and I want you to look around. If an event happens and they're already in my building, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to defend myself in here? If an event takes place outside and they're trying to begin, what are you going to do? How are you going to defend against it? So it's important to get the information, but it's even more important for you guys to think through problems that could arise, so that when you are faced with those problems, you're not facing them for the first time. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So, like I said, you guys are completely and solely responsible for your children, but while that's going on, other things are going to be taking place too. An example, the register and the curriculum coordinator. So what they're going to be doing is verifying the second entrance door is closed. So right now we have that propped open for ease of child movement, because we don't have parents coming into our buildings right now. So it's not as much of a concern, whereas before COVID, we were having parents come in, pick up, and we wanted to have those doors, both of them, secured at all times. So in the event that we go to a soft lockdown or hard lockdown, we're going to close that second entrance. They're going to gather the emergency evacuation binder and the radio. The black radios, in the event that there's an emergency, we're always going to go to channel 1. So security is always on channel 1 for anything. That includes myself, that includes Pastor McKnight, that includes Pastor Tucker and Greg Stiles, are all monitoring channel 1. So in the event that something happens and you're not even sure if this is a problem, I don't want anybody to be afraid or anxious or nervous about getting on the radio. Call it over the radio. We can come check it out. If it's something, it's something. But if it's nothing, hey, good practice. So that's important. So making sure if you get a hold of a radio, and I know a lot of times when you guys go on walks, you have the small radios. If you're on a walk and something happens, call over that radio, and whoever's monitoring the black radio in the office can send out information to us so that we can respond. But in the event that you're here and you need to get a hold of somebody, that radio's in there, grab the radio, make sure it's on channel 1, and it usually always is, and then just call us on the radio. So always go to channel 1 in the event of an emergency, and somebody's always monitoring that. Ensure all interior doors are locked and the lights are off in the classrooms. So doors closed, lights are off. And that's what they're going to be checking. You guys have already done that. This is just what they're coming through on their check through to make sure everything's okay. And then assist with communication. So getting information on what's the threat, where is it, things like that. The director and the assistant director, they're going to check all the outside doors. So when this happens, they're going to go through it and they're going to be checking all your exterior doors to make sure they're secured. So don't be alarmed if you see Annette or Jurgen walking outside your classroom after we've gone to a lockdown. They're making sure that you guys are all set. Then they're all going to meet in the director's office, and that way they can figure out what's going on and disseminate information to you guys. So that's where they're going to be. And they're going to be monitoring the radio, email, and text message communications. So on our last drill, that Exodus drill that we did, we found that a lot of people, and we found some flaws, which is really important and why we do drills, of communications. And what we found is the PA system, like through the intercoms on the phones, not everybody had a phone, so they didn't know. Or they didn't have a radio, or they didn't get a text message alert saying that this is what we were doing. So monitoring radio, email, and text message communication is important. That's what they're going to be doing. That way, if they get any information, they can send it to you guys. And then as directed by senior leadership, they're going to be using ProCare's emergency email and text message system. So that's kind of what the director and the assistant director are going to be doing. And like I said, when this event, if an event happens, you have your binders with you and you're not releasing your children until you're told all clear and you've been given authority to release them, and then they are signing out. The worst thing in the world is a parent comes and there's a frantic, they're trying to get their kids, they take their kids and you don't know that they're gone, and now we're under a lost child or unaccounted child in the event of during or after an event. So making sure that everybody signs out and nobody gets released until they've signed that book out. That way you know you're clear. I already talked about brevity codes. So the whole point of brevity codes, and it's for people that are watching this, brevity codes are designed to send information without necessarily panicking the public. So we all know our brevity codes, and when we use those, we can use those out loud without fear of causing panic, if we're doing Concordia Fest or something like that, so that people don't necessarily know what's going on, but we know what's going on. So that's the whole point of brevity codes. The last drill is I talked about the brevity code for an active shooter. Active shooter is the definition of why we go to a hard lockdown. So going into your classrooms, making sure doors are shut, locked, lights off, children quiet, and ushered into a corner and waiting till you're all clear. One of the things that we're going to start trying to implement, and this was brought up in the last class, is your guys' doors, the bathroom doors, it's open all the way through. So one of the things that was brought up is, what if somebody gets into a classroom, they have free access? We're going to barricade those doors as well. We're pretty much barricading all entry points and exit points in our classrooms. But one of the things we're going to try to look into is they're like door stoppers, and you just pretty much wedge that door, and so anybody that tries to open it, it won't open. So that's something we're going to look at doing. And it was brought up another question of, well, how do we know when it's safe to come out? What if SAPD's here? How do we know that it's safe, or how do we get information to them? So one of the things that I'm looking into is getting kind of a card. It's laminated, and what you can do is you can write your name, how many kids, how many adults, and if there's any medical issues going on. And when SAPD or whoever's coming through, without unbarricading yourself before everything's clear, because this is how it works. SAPD responds to an active shooter. They're going to clear all the way to that active shooter, but they're not going to release you or have you exit. They're going to have you stay in your classrooms, but they're going to make sure everybody's okay. So by using that card, you could slide it under the door. They can see, hey, I've got 20 kids in here, 2 are injured, we need to get them medical attention. And that way that information can be sent back without necessarily unbarricading yourself. Because law enforcement's job in the event of an active shooter is to neutralize the threat, to stop the threat, and then go back and provide aid. Because no matter if they go back and they try to help get medical attention to individuals and the threat comes back, everybody's at risk. So they're going to keep moving on. It's nothing personal. It's nothing. They want to help you, but the best way to help you is to stop that. So by having that information, whoever's coming behind them can get the attention that's needed toward your classrooms. Do I have any questions, any concerns, anything that you've kind of been thinking about of, hey, I'm kind of curious about how this works, or what if we did this? Do I have any questions? There is no wrong question. I just stood up here and talked, and pretty sure I stumbled through a bunch of my words. So, no questions? Okay, so question for you. So soft lockdown. What would you do in a soft lockdown? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Hard lockdown. What would we do in a hard lockdown? What's one thing that we could do during a hard lockdown? Yeah. So shutting the doors. The other thing we can do is turning the lights off, barricading. One of the questions was asked, say for instance you guys are out on a prayer walk and we get the brevity code for a hard lockdown. Where would you go? Would you come all the way back here, or would you go to the nearest building? Nearest building, right? So, and that was brought up in the last class of, hey, what happens if we're in a hard lockdown, you're all the way by G building? You're going to go to the nearest building, you're going to bang on that door, you're going to identify yourself and who you've got with you and that you need to get inside. And you're going to use your best mama bear voice ever to inflict a sense of urgency for whoever's on the other side of that door. But it's also really important for you guys to observe what's going on around you. So another question was asked, well, what if I'm at that door, somebody's banging on the door to get in, do I let them in? So it's one of those, I can't tell you, yes, let them in, or no, don't let them in. It's one of those, it really has to be a situational dictates. If, say for instance, you say, yes, I'm gonna let them in, but that threat is right behind them, now you've possibly endangered everybody else in that building. But if the threat's not anywhere near them, you could possibly let them in, keep them safe. So as much as we want a black and white yes or no, in that instance, I can't tell you yes, do it, or no, don't do it. It's one of those, you have to observe what's going on around you, both if you're in that situation trying to get in, or if somebody's banging on your door to get in. You got to really look and understand what's going on around you. And are you prepared to open that door and let somebody in, and then the threat comes in right behind them? So these are all things that you kind of got to think about now and later when you're sitting in your classrooms looking of, if this happens, what are my indicators for opening the door or not opening the door? So it's scary, and I wish I could tell you guys, yes, go ahead and do it, or no, don't do it. So yes.
Sorry, can you talk about again, if we are in a situation and we are in lockdown and the lights are off,
Mm-hmm.
and we know we're going to be waiting a while possibly if there's a real situation, how do we know again when it's safe?
Okay, so the question was, once you're in lockdown and it's been a while, how do you necessarily know that it's safe to release? So that's going to be either Annette, Jurgen, or myself will come and say, hey, it's been lifted, you can go ahead and come out. But you are not going to come if Joe Blow comes to your door and says, hey, it's clear, come in. You're not going to release. You're going to wait for somebody, myself, SAPD, and the best thing is have them identify themselves. Just because they say they're SAPD, you don't know that. Let me see a badge. Let me see something that indicates that, yes, you are a person of authority that is releasing. If I come to the door and I say, hey, it's you guys are good, let me see your badge. Let me see your ID tag that says, yes, you're staffed here, yes, you're security. That's important. So that's a good question, and it brought up another, making sure that you identify whoever's telling you that it's good to release to get that information. Do you have a question?
So they will use the PA system to let us know that.
They could, yes, they could use the PA system if it's a soft lockdown. But if it's a hard lockdown, somebody's probably going to go to your door and individually tell every door, hey, it's all clear, and show information or identification. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Well, I really appreciate your guys' attention and your questions. I don't have anything else for you.